Welcome. This week's Parsha is Parshas Toldos. It should be a refuah shlema. Toldos need a refuah, especially Rachel bas Chava and Mordechai ben Sarah, and for all our chayalim should be safe and sound. So to start off with the story, there's the central theme to this week's Parsha is Tefillah. So Rabbi Spiro in his Sefer, touched by the story, tells a story from the Baal Shem Tov. So leading up to Yom Kippur, Baal Shem Tov and his surrounding communities were suffering through a severe drought that caused devastating famine. And their Rabbanan instituted several fast days, but their prayers seemed to be left unanswered. There was still a famine. Tragically, in the week leading up to Yom Kippur, Rahman al-Litzlan, there were many children that had passed away due to the famine. So the people were despondent, feeling that all hope was lost. But during the Yom Kippur Marav prayer, the Baal Shem Tov noticed a simple Jew praying with extraordinary kavanah during Kriyat Shema, specifically on the words V'atzar hashamayim v'lo yiyeh matar. He will hold back the heavens and there will be no rain. As this man uttered those words, the heavens opened up and rain began to fall. For 3 days, the downpour continued and the drought ended. After Yom Kippur, the Baal Shem Tov went over to this Yid and was curious what was his kavanah during this tefillah. So this Yid explained to the Baal Shem Tov, I imagined an olive being pressed for the last drop of oil. And when I said, V'lo yiyeh matar, I prayed to Hashem, please Hashem, do not allow even one drop of rain to remain in the sky. Squeeze every last drop out. Hearing this, the Baal Shem Tov smiled and understood the profound truth. A heartfelt and sincere tefillah has the power to annul even the harshest of decrees. So moving to Pesukim Perek Chaf Hey, Pesukim Chaf and Chaf Aleph, it mentions Rivka's lineage, followed by Yitzchak's prayer. So Rashi explains, why does the Torah mention Rivka's lineage? Rivka bas Besuel, who was Achos Lavan Ha'arami. And Rashi explains that although Rivka grew up in a household of rishus, of wickedness, she was still able to be steadfast in her righteousness and be a tzedekes. Rav Chanan Shaf, quoting the Likutei Chaber Ben Chaim, the name of Toldos Yitzchak, offers an additional perspective here. Following the lineage of Rivka, Yitzchak davens for Rivka, nochach ishto, opposite his wife, in front of Rivka. Why was this significant? So the Gemara in Brachos and the Maril, as brought out in the Halacha by the Magen Avraham, teach that when one prays for a sick person in their presence, there's no need to mention their name. However, if you're davening for a sick from a distance, from afar, not in front of them, then you're required to say their name. So when Yitzchak was praying for Rivka to conceive, he would have been required to mention her name and by extension her father's name, Besuel. The Chassam Sofer explains that if Besuel's name was mentioned in Yitzchak's prayer, it could have aroused divine judgment against Yitzchak himself. So to avoid this, and to avoid having to mention the need to mention his wicked father-in-law in his prayer, Yitzchak davened nochach ishto, in front of Rivka, to avoid this. At first glance, one might wonder, Rivka's selection as Yitzchak's wife was not happenstance. It was orchestrated with siyata dishmaya. Rivka was chosen through a clear divine sign, as evidenced as through Eliezer's journey that we learned in last week's Parsha, and the siman of Rivka's kindness at the well. So why then did Hashem choose Rivka, a woman who was barren, to be Yitzchak's wife? The Drashos Haran addresses this question through the Gemara in Yevamos, which teaches that Hashem desires the tefillah of tzaddikim. Prayer is not merely a means to achieve one's requests, but an opportunity for the soul to connect deeply with its creator. Through tefillah, one forges a stronger bond with Hashem, elevating their spiritual essence. Thus, Rivka's barrenness was not a contradiction for divine selection, but an essential part of Hashem's plan. Hashem specifically chose a woman who was barren to ensure that Yitzchak would pray for her, thereby deepening his connection to Hashem. It was through Yitzchak's heartfelt tefillah that her womb was ultimately open for fulfilling their shared destiny. So this teaches that challenges in life are not obstacles, but divine invitations to engage more deeply with Hashem through tefillah. Through tefillah, we can elevate ourselves and draw down divine blessings into the world. We find in this week's Parsha an important Yesod Mesorah, brought by Rav Hershel Schachter in the name of Rav Soloveitchik. So in Perek Chava Pasuk Yud Ches, we find that Yitzchak redug the wells of his father, Avraham, which after Avraham's time had been closed up by the Plishtim, and he was following the Mesorah of his father and redigging those wells and named it after the same names that his father used. This commitment to his father's legacy was also found when there was a famine and Yitzchak went down to Gerar, intending to continue further to dwell in Mitzrayim just like his father Avraham did. However, Hashem instructed Yitzchak not to descend to Mitzrayim, but he should stay in Eretz Yisrael. This divergence from Avraham's action was not a break from Mesorah, but a reflection of Yitzchak's unique status. After the Akedah, Yitzchak was elevated to the level of a Korban Olah, acquiring a special Kedusha, a special holiness that prohibited him from leaving Eretz Yisrael. This Kedusha did not apply to Avraham, which is why he was permitted to go to Mitzrayim. But Yitzchak, who was on this elevated level, was not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael, could not go down to Mitzrayim. So we see that sometimes following the Mesorah needs to be adapted to the circumstances. Rav Hershel Schachter Shlita gives two examples of this. First, regarding koshering pots. So if you have a pot that needs to be koshered and gets mixed up with all the other pots in the kitchen that are kosher, so the Shulchan Aruch paskins that due to the expensive nature of getting hot water and koshering the pots, one would not need to, it would be batal barov, and one would not need to do hagala on all of the pots in that got mixed up. However, Rav Soloveitchik explains nowadays that's not the case. Nowadays, hot water is easily accessible, it's not expensive, and thus the halacha would change here, and one would need to, bitul barov would not apply, because now we have a davar sheyesh lamatir, and something that could practically be done to be matir, to make it permitted, and one would have to do hagala on all of the pots. Another example is given regarding tefillah from Rav Shimon Schwab. Rav Shimon Schwab saw someone wearing a tie. He took off his tie and put it around his waist as a gartel in preparation for tefillah, fulfilling the pasuk of Hachom l'kras Elokecha Yisrael, prepare to meet your God Hashem Yisrael. Rav Schwab, however, felt that in contemporary times, the more appropriate expression of preparation for tefillah would be to wear a tie. Thus, by this individual removing his tie and putting it as a gartel, he was inadvertently neglecting what the Mesorah is for this day and age, for this time. So these are just two examples that demonstrate that Mesorah is extremely important. However, there are times where it's not static, where it evolves based on circumstances. Let's end off with a very interesting insight from the Beis HaLevi. So in Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Chav Beis, we have the famous Pasuk of Yaakov going to Yitzchak in Esav's garments, and Yitzchak replies, Hakol kol Yaakov v'adayim yedei Esav. The voice is of Yaakov, but the feeling, the appearance is of the hands of Esav. So the Beis HaLevi wonders, why didn't Yitzchak investigate further to confirm the identity of the individual before conferring the blessings. He realized that there was a contradiction here. He should have inquired further. He should have looked into it further. So the Beis Halevi explains that Esav, fearing that Yaakov might try to deceive their father and take the brachos from Esav, devised a strategy. Esav made a siman, a prearranged sign with his father. He would speak like Yaakov, imitating his voice and manner of speaking, but his hands would retain their characteristic feel. Esav believed that if Yaakov ever attempted to deceive Yitzchak, he would alter his voice to speak more like Esav and to sound like Esav. So we see this little insight sheds new light onto the pasuk. When Yitzchak remarked, "Hakol kol Yaakov v'adayim b'dei Esav," he recognized the two Simanim that was set up between Esav and his father, between Esav and Yitzchak. The voice and touch were the two markers. This voice sounds like Yaakov, check. And Yadayim b'dei Esav, this must be Esav, as these are the prearranged signs of that Esav had set up with his father. So trusting these signs, Yitzchak then proceeded to give the bracha to Yaakov. Have a wonderful Shabbos.